Don't lose trust all at once. And you don't rebuild it all at once either. It happens slowly, in small moments, in decisions you make or don't make. And one of the hardest kinds of trust to rebuild is the trust you have in yourself. Because when you break your own trust, it doesn't just affect what you do, it affects how you see yourself. You start second guessing, doubting your decisions, questioning your ability to follow through. And over time, that doubt becomes your default. So let's talk about how to rebuild that, not in theory, but in a real practical way. Because rebuilding trust with yourself isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming consistent. Let's start with what breaks self-trust. It's not just big mistakes, it's the small things, the promises you make to yourself and don't keep. I'll start tomorrow. I'll wake up early. I'll finish this. And when you don't follow through, it sends a message, a quiet one, but a powerful one, that says, I can't rely on myself. And the more that happens, the stronger that belief becomes. Now here's the shift. Rebuilding trust doesn't start with big changes. It starts small, very small, because trust is built through evidence, and evidence comes from action. So instead of setting big goals, start with something you know you can do, something simple, something achievable, and then do it. Not once, but repeatedly, because consistency is what builds trust. Now let's talk about something important. You don't need to feel motivated to rebuild trust. In fact, waiting for motivation is one of the biggest traps, because motivation comes and goes. But trust is built through action, especially when you don't feel like it. Now here's another key point. Be careful with the promises you make to yourself, because every promise carries weight, and if you make too many, or make them too big, you increase the chances of breaking them. So instead of saying, I'm going to change everything, say, I'm going to do this one thing, and then do it. Now let's talk about setbacks, because they will happen, and when they do, your response matters. Most people respond to setbacks with frustration, self-criticism. They tell themselves they've failed, but that doesn't rebuild trust. It reinforces doubt. So instead, respond with awareness. Acknowledge what happened, understand why it happened, and then move forward, because one mistake doesn't erase progress. Now let's talk about identity, because rebuilding trust is not just about actions, it's about how you see yourself. When you consistently follow through on small commitments, you start to shift your identity from someone who doesn't follow through to someone who does. And that shift changes everything, because your actions begin to align with that identity. Now here's something people don't talk about enough. Rest. Sometimes what looks like a lack of discipline is actually burnout. And pushing harder doesn't fix burnout, it deepens it. So part of rebuilding trust is learning when to rest, not as an escape, but as a strategy. Because you can't trust yourself to perform if you're constantly running on empty. Now let's talk about boundaries, because trust also comes from protecting your energy. If you say yes to everything, if you overcommit, you create situations where you're more likely to break promises. So part of this process is learning to say no, to create space, to focus on what matters. Now let's bring this together. Rebuilding trust with yourself is not about becoming a different person overnight. It's about small, consistent actions. It's about keeping the promises you make. It's about responding to setbacks with awareness, not judgment. And it's about understanding your limits, so you can work within them. Now here's the most important part. This takes time, but every small action you take, every promise you keep, adds up. And over time, that builds something powerful. Confidence. Not the kind that comes from thinking, but the kind that comes from doing. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been doubting yourself, if you feel like you've lost trust in your own ability, start small. Do one thing, keep one promise, and then do it again. Because that's how trust is rebuilt, not all at once, but one action at a time. And the more you show up for yourself, the more you'll start to believe that you can. So take a breath, take a step forward, and remember, you don't rebuild trust all at once. You rebuild it by showing yourself that you can be trusted. If you want next level, I can. Turn this into emotional storytelling version, create viral TikTok clips, make faceless AI narration version. Just tell me signs you're emotionally burned out. 15-minute. Here's a premium 15-minute script for signs you're emotionally burned out. Reflective, relatable, and deeply engaging. 15-minute script. You don't always notice burnout when it starts. It doesn't usually hit all at once. It builds slowly, quietly, until one day, things that used to feel normal start to feel heavy, and things that used to matter don't feel the same anymore. That's emotional burnout, and a lot of people are going through it without even realizing it. So let's talk about the signs, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle ones too, because recognizing it is the first step to doing something about it. One of the first signs is constant exhaustion, not just physical tiredness, but emotional fatigue. You wake up feeling drained, even after rest, even after doing nothing. And it's confusing because you can't point to one specific reason, it's just there. Now here's another sign. You feel detached from your work, from people, even from things you used to enjoy. You go through the motions, but you don't feel fully present. It's like you're there, but not really there, and that can feel unsettling. Another sign is irritability. Small things start to feel bigger than they should. You get frustrated more easily. Your patience runs out faster, and sometimes you don't even recognize yourself in those moments. Now let's talk about motivation, because this is where many people get it wrong. They think they're just being lazy, but it's not laziness, it's depletion. You want to care. You just don't have the energy to engage, and that lack of energy makes everything feel harder. Now here's a big one. You start avoiding things, not because you don't care, but because everything feels overwhelming. Even simple tasks, even things that used to be easy. Avoidance becomes a way to cope, but over time, it adds to the stress. Now, let's talk about overthinking. Your mind doesn't switch off. You replay conversations. You think about what you should have done, what you need to do, what might go wrong. And that constant mental activity drains your energy even more. Another sign is feeling emotionally numb. Not sad, not anxious, just flat. You don't react the way you used to. Things don't excite you. They don't upset you. They just pass. And while that might feel easier in the moment, it's actually a sign that your system is overloaded. Now let's talk about self-doubt. Burnout can make you question yourself, your abilities, your decisions, even your worth. You start second-guessing everything, and that creates a cycle. Because the more you doubt yourself, the harder it becomes to take action. Now here's something important. Burnout doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you've been carrying too much for too long, without enough recovery, and your mind and body are responding the only way they can, by slowing you down. Now let's talk about what you can do, because awareness alone isn't enough. The first step is to acknowledge it, not ignore it, not push through it. Acknowledge it, because you can't fix what you don't recognize. The second step is to reduce the load. Not everything needs your attention right now. Not everything is urgent. Give yourself permission to step back, to prioritize, to let some things wait. Now let's talk about rest, real rest. Not just distraction, not just scrolling, but rest that actually allows your mind to recover. That might mean stepping away, spending time in quiet, doing something that doesn't demand anything from you. Now here's another important step. Set boundaries, because burnout often comes from giving too much, to work, to responsibilities, to other people, and not leaving enough for yourself. So learning to say no is part of protecting your energy. Now let's talk about small actions. When you're burned out, big changes feel impossible. So don't start there. Start small. One task, one step, one action. Because small progress builds momentum, and momentum helps you move forward. Now here's the most important part. Be patient with yourself. Recovery takes time, and it's not linear. There will be good days and difficult days, but that doesn't mean you're not improving. It means you're human. Now let's bring this together. Emotional burnout is not always obvious. It shows up in subtle ways. Exhaustion, detachment, irritability, lack of motivation, overthinking, numbness, self-doubt, avoidance. These are not signs of failure. They are signals. Signals that you need to slow down, to reset, to take care of yourself. So if you've been feeling this way, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're overwhelmed, and that's something you can recover from. So take a step back, take a breath, and start with one small change. Because recovery doesn't happen all at once. It happens one step at a time. And the more you listen to what your mind and body are telling you, the better you can take care of yourself. And that's what truly matters.